Today I'm in my garden in Colchester trying to photograph starlings. The garden is really quite small. It's a town garden. It's only 70 foot long and about 40 foot wide. We get lots of birds coming in there, but it's mainly sparrows, starlings, blue tits, nothing really exciting. But they still make good subjects to photograph. What I've done is set something up here so that I can actually photograph them when I come onto this lichened bush or twig that I've positioned here on this tripod. The hide is set up in the background, about sort of 20 foot away, which is the right distance that will give me a nice decent sized image when I'm photographing. Today I'm using the EM1 MkIII and I'm using the 40 to 150 2.8 lens, but I'm using it in conjunction with a 1.4 converter. So together it's giving me effective focal length of about 210, which in DSLR, full frame DSLR terms, is about 420mm focal length. The idea is that the birds will come into these bushes and the apple trees to my left hand side and fly onto here. The problem is that I have lots of starlings coming in. When they come in, they'll come in droves, and you might get 30 or even 40 of them coming down at once. 30 or 40 on this little setup is going to look ridiculous. So what I do is I have another setup over there, bird table and another feeder, and most of them will probably go to there, but you will get some that will fly over to here. Hopefully what I want is that you get 2 or 3 onto the actual feeder, but then 1 or 2 will come across there, and because there's 2 birds on there already, they can't actually get on there, so they queue up and wait on these branches here, and then hopefully I can get a decent shot. Closer look at the setup that I'm actually trying to get the birds to land on. I've got the fat feeders there in a nice cage feeder, and hopefully what they'll do is the birds will fly in from over here and land on this branch there. I've got it set up on an old Bembo tripod, which is something that I use to actually sort of position branches and things that I want to do. You can't see from that side the actual lichen that's on the actual branch. It's only on one side of the branch, but if I twist it round, hopefully you can make out and see the nice yellow coloured lichen on the branch, which from the actual hide side makes quite a nice pictorial coloration for the birds to land on. The nice thing about this Bembo tripod is that I can actually position it any way I want. If I undo it and I can move it up, I can move it down, I can actually sort of just pick the whole thing up and move it forward if I want to, or backwards. So it's very, very adaptable and really nice and solid. So the birds hopefully land on there and then go to the actual fat feeder. The hide is a Watching Wildlife dome hide. I've had it for a number of years. I positioned it about 5 or 6 days ago, and the birds have got really quite used to it. Initially, when you first put a hide up in a new position, sometimes it takes the birds a few days just to get used to it, but here they're quite used to it and take no notice whatsoever. You'll notice the lens poking through the opening there. I've got some scrim netting around that so they can't actually see my hands or face, and they get quite used to it, and it's set up right distance that I need for photographing the starlings. This bush that we have growing against a trellis on the fence really makes a nice background. When I'm looking from the hide at the lichen covered branches, this bush is probably something like about 25 feet away from the actual setup there. So it's nicely out of focus when I'm shooting wide open at f4. If I move the camera about 15 foot to the left, you'll see that the background changes dramatically. I've got concrete posts, old stumps, really sort of not a nice background at all. And although it might be out of focus at f4, it will still be quite distracting. So always set up and think about your backgrounds before you actually put a hide or anything up. So I'm in my hide in the garden. I've got everything set up there, and it's just a case of waiting for the birds to perform. I have lots of periods where it goes very, very quiet, nothing happens for a while, and then all of a sudden the birds will start to come in regularly. Once you get one or two coming in, you'll find that the others get more confident and start to then sort of come in quite regularly. Tomorrow in Colchester there's a heavy snow is forecast overnight, so I changed the setup because I thought this particular setup would actually suit snow better than the previous one. So I've taken the bembo away, and here sort of got a table. It's actually on a Black & Decker workmate, and I've got some silver birch logs, some mossy log here. Hopefully tomorrow this will all be coated in a nice tracery of snow. I'm still using the lichen covered branch because they do look quite nice when they actually fly in here. The idea again is that they will come to the feeder here. Okay, when you've got 2 or 3 birds on there, the others have got to queue up, and with there being snow, hopefully the birds will really be coming in quite a lot tomorrow. The whole setup is actually on one of these do-it-yourself Black & Decker workmate type things. You can see that the birds will be coming into it quite ready. There's actually a long-tailed tit just flown in there now. You can just see it's gone to the actual feeder. There's another one's actually flying onto the actual branch, and then they'll come onto the fat feeder. So what I want is them to actually be sort of up on the branches. So now we're going to be looking at a few still images I've taken using this setup and very similar setups on previous occasions. The first shot shows the long-tailed tit. We saw them in the video coming in quite regularly onto the branches, and this shot is nicely lit, well composed. The next picture actually shows the setup, or the original shot, with it full frame, and here I've put a white line around the actual image to show how I've cropped it in post. The next picture of another long-tailed tit I find actually compositionally a lot nicer. There's a bit more of the branch, and there's a nice angle to it with the branch coming in from the top left hand side and the bottom branch going out. It just works for me as a composition a lot better. I show the original shot. You can see that it is quite a decent sized crop from the image. The next picture is a portrait shot of a robin. It's cropped into portrait format because it actually landed a little bit too close to the actual feeders to me to do a landscape picture. But having said that, it works quite well as a portrait shot. And I include also the original shot just to show you, and it has the ISO, aperture and shutter speed included. The next picture is a coal tit, and here is some taken on a previous occasion, and here I've used a different type of perch. Branches or twigs with berries on do make nice pictures for the birds to land on, as you'll see in the next picture of a great tit. Again, find a nice bit of branch with some nice berries on, attach them to a bembo or some sort of clamp near the feeder, and the birds will fly onto it often as not before they land on the feeder. The next picture is a greenfinch. Unfortunately, we don't get greenfinches in our garden anywhere as often as we used to, but they still are very, very attractive birds to photograph. This shot of a blue tit has it perched nicely on a piece of bramble. Bramble is something that they would naturally land on in the countryside, so again you can use this as a perch for them to land on before they fly to a feeder. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video and found it helpful. Please check out my website at www.rogerhantzfrps.com, and the next video in this series will be part 2, and it will deal with photographing birds in snowy conditions. Thanks for watching.